Hello, and welcome back to the Nonprofit Spotlight, where we take some time to know our community better by learning about some of the great nonprofit organizations in our neighborhood and the leaders that are making all their work possible. What happens when the people we love outlive the systems meant to support them? Across the U.S., millions of adults with developmental disabilities want what most of us take for granted: a place of their own, a reason to get up in the morning, and a community where they belong. For many, that drama feels almost impossible or even out of reach, caught between long wait lists, low wages, aging caregivers, and a housing market that was never built with them in mind. Today's episode is about a nonprofit quietly rewriting that story. OSG Communities, or Our Stomping Ground, is building inclusive, neighborhood-based communities where adults with developmental disabilities don't just live, they grow, connect, ride the bus to dinner with friends, make art, stretch in yoga classes, and shape lives on their own terms. What started as a bold idea has become a proven, replicable model that challenges how we think about housing, independence, and belonging. In this conversation, we'll explore why this work matters now, what happens when communities are designed with empathy instead of assumptions, and how solving the housing crisis for people with disabilities might actually make all of us better neighbors. Stay with us, because this isn't just a story about disability. It's a story about dignity, community, and what becomes possible when inclusion is built in from the start. Well, welcome. I'm happy to introduce Paula and Margot to our conversation today. Do you two mind taking a moment and introducing yourselves?
I'm Paula Manion, and I'm the founding chair of Our Stomping Ground. And I currently am still involved on whatever level I can be, but I defer to Margot, who took over our organization and is running it incredibly.
Well, thank you. Yeah, my name is Margot Greenlee, and I always like to say I am the very proud executive director of Our Stomping Ground.
Welcome. So glad to have both of you with us on the podcast today. Thank you for sharing your very valuable time. Let's just start off with a little bit of a narrative about how OSG Communities began, more specifically with a bold vision that started sometime around 2019. Could you share a little bit about those initial moments and conversations?
Sure. Thank you so much, Mike. So my husband and I have 3 children, and our oldest has autism. And back in 2018, in the winter of 2018, he was going to be turning 30. And we went to a seminar on housing options for adults with developmental disabilities. And that is where we learned about Main Street Connect. I don't know if you've ever heard about Main Street. Scott and Jillian Copeland in Rockville, Maryland. They're just a really dynamic couple, and they started Main Street Connect, the organization, and it's a apartment building that they built together. Her husband's a developer. She's a dynamic educator and founder herself of a school. And so they built this building, and they came to talk about it. And I'm sitting there in the audience with my husband and my son, and I just love everything about it. It's affordable. It's inclusive, it's community-based, so close to transportation and grocery stores. And then it has a network community within its community. So they have community space for programming, for networking, they'll have lots of opportunities to socially connect. There'll be a coffee house in the building. And this is going through my head, and I think it couldn't get more perfect for our son. How can we do that? So after a little contemplation, and said to my husband, you think I certainly know enough people. I'm a nurse practitioner for over 30 years, taking care of children as a pediatric nurse practitioner. Many of my patients, most of my patients, in fact, probably a good third to almost half, were children with disabilities. And so I knew their families really well, and they were sitting across from me, and they had the same fears that my husband and I had. And I knew them well enough that I thought perhaps I could gather a few of them and see if we could begin something like this in Northern Virginia. So that's how it started. And I will tell you that there's a lot of fear involved in that. There's fear of this is an enormous task. My husband's not a developer. I haven't founded a school. I'm not, connected in the same circles the Copelands were, which was amazing. And so I was fearful of that. But I was also, on the other hand, fearful of what waited on the other side, which was nothing for our son. Absolutely nothing. He continued to live in our basement. His physical and mental health were going down. He was lonely. He had a job. He couldn't afford housing. He didn't drive. He couldn't get anywhere. And this actual picture of that evolving and us leading the world is so overwhelming that we began the movement forward, one step at a time. I held my husband's hand and said, "You think we can do this?" And he said, "Yes." And that's powerful.
Margaret, do you want to add to that or some initial ideas as well?
What's really remarkable to me about this story, everything that Paula just said, and once Paula and Joe started to put the word out around Arlington and, across Northern Virginia, they got an incredible response actually from the affordable housing developer side of things that said, you don't need to build, it's already here. The housing exists, but it's not being properly utilized and connected with. That then, I'm just so impressed that Paula and Joe and the people that were already getting interested in the idea, I'm really impressed that they had this incredible passion and picture in their mind, and then were able to make the pivot and be like, it doesn't have to look like the definition or the way that Main Street does. There's this other road, and that's really what created the OSG that exists today.
The nuance there between the Main Street concept or model and something called the neighborhood-based communities model. Could you say a little bit about what that difference is?
Well, just to Margot can elaborate on this, but imagine that the first day that Main Street opens applications for a 70-unit apartment building with only 25% aside for people with disabilities, the very first day, applications open, 1,000 people apply. The second day, an additional 1,000. Now, take that with you for a minute and imagine that for all it would take us to build a building, because the initial team of us that sat around my kitchen table back in the day wanted a building, and people who were drawn to this, they wanted that same building. So we lost to the people we started with when we pivoted. But the truth is, and the reality is, we can serve more people this way. Yeah.
Yeah, I'll throw in a statistic. In our area, in the region number 2 in Virginia, there are about 250 apartment units that have what's called a DD preference. So people who want to live in that building that have a developmental disability waiver get first dibs, essentially. So Main Street could house 20 to 30, had 20 to 30 apartments. Out here, when we collaborate with affordable housing, we've got 250. Like, we've got 10 times the amount of units that are potentially available. And so not only did OSG not have to become a bricks and mortar organization, which would have been a huge undertaking for people who are not developers, who were really going to have to start that deep capital investment campaign together, but make use of what's there and really start to help people with developmental disabilities understand how this whole affordable housing system works. So I'm really grateful that all of those things happen in that order, and that, yes, it does sound like, there was some loss there, people who had a vision and needed to stay with that initial concept. But wow, for the trajectory of Our Stomping Ground has been just incredibly profound because of that decision.
Because the focus wasn't necessarily on a brick and mortar building, can you say a little bit about, or maybe help listeners understand a little bit about how the community works, or how OSG Communities does its work to support your clients and their families?
Go ahead, Margot.
Yeah. So instead of building ourselves, we collaborate with affordable housing developers across 7 different sites. We have 3 in Arlington, 2 in Alexandria, 1 in Herndon, and 1 just across from the George Mason University campus. And our staff, OSG staff, are there to help be the extra set of eyes and ears on the ground for anybody with developmental disabilities. And we provide every day, except for a few Sundays here and there, lots of really great programs, events that everyone in the building is invited to. So, for example, if OSG hosts art at the Waypoint this Saturday at 1:00, yes, the initial invitation goes out to the OSG community, of which there are about 2,000 people in this area. But everybody at the building is invited, right? So you have another 300 neighbors that have the chance to get together. And when we do that, I feel like the more we are able to spend time together, create together, get curious about one another, we are completely destigmatizing disability, much less developmental disability. And we're really building the inclusive future that we all want.
I love that. Let me just add, people are lonely, Mike. I'm sure I don't have to tell anybody out there and who's listening, tell you That's the biggest problem we have in our country. We have a poverty of loneliness. And so what we have found is the greatest thing we solve for our adults is loneliness. And loneliness has a tremendously profound impact on health and well-being. And so while we're at it, we're making really great neighborhoods,
Hmm.
right? We're getting to know our neighbors
Yeah,
and we're helping that.
that's great. That's great. So the numbers around unemployment and isolation and aging caregivers are stark, right? Because you all are trying to create environments where your clients are part of the community in a way that they weren't typically or have not traditionally been a part of. So what do you think is the most misunderstood statistic, specifically when trying to care for individuals or families that have children with developmental disabilities?
An aging parent is somebody over 60. So we have a lot of adults with DD who have older parents that are getting older and that are, just like Paula was talking about earlier, that are incredibly worried about what happens when I'm gone. Now, when we really look at what that means on the ground, is that some families, some adults with developmental disabilities, have two parents that are well resourced, that can take care of them, that can provide housing and social connection and any of the additional like medical services and supports that they need. Their parents are able to help them with this. Many have parents that are exhausted, financially depleted, and really just trying to make it from day to day. So when we look at that number, there's so much inequity involved in how people with DD get their day-to-day care. OSG is here to help remove some of that by, like I said before, being the extra support on the ground and really wanting to give parents, many of them are single women, giving parents a sense of like, here are fellow parents to talk to, right? Yes, we want to solve for loneliness for the adults with developmental disabilities, but there's often kind of prolonged isolation and loneliness at the parental level as well. And so we're doing kind of a multi-generational, we're breaking it up for both parents and the adult child. And I would say there's a lot of carryover to siblings, right? Because oftentimes it will be a sibling that has to take over care when a parent is gone. Right now, we have probably 30 to 40,000 people with developmental disabilities across Northern Virginia that will need care. We'll talk a little bit more about the statistic of how many people already receive some funding support, but there's lots of people that need care, lots of people that aren't reported. And so the need is great. Paula, do you have anything else?
I think the most alarming statistic out of that is that only 10% are receiving publicly funded supports. And, think about it I read this statistic a long time ago. If you're a mother of a child with a disability, you're going to make 38% less in your lifetime. And that is just the reality. So couple that with the burden that you often have of raising a child with a disability financially
Yeah.
and then growing older.
Yeah. And I'm sure we have some listeners to the podcast who this is the first time they've heard of Our Stomping Ground. And the idea of kind of relinquishing some of that responsibility because they put their heart and life into caring for their child. The idea of independence seems almost scary or even unrealistic, but you guys talk about it as interdependence. Maybe you could say a little bit more about what that looks like, and if you were like from the mindset of a caregiving parent.
Yeah, well, I think a lot of the language in the school system and in our culture is we want to be independent when we grow up, right? It's very US American bootstrapsy kind of language. And yet we know that day-to-day life is really about being helped and helping. Like we are always doing this. And so we like to say interdependence because it shows we have different skills and things that we offer each other. We will intentionally rely on each other. Self-sufficiency is not necessarily the goal. I might want to be self-sufficient here and there throughout my day, but really this world is about leaning on each other. The more we pull away, the more we fall down. That's just physics. So yes, we make an intentional statement about that.
Thank you. Can you say a little bit about, or maybe share a story about how having community in addition to housing has really changed one of your clients or one of the families that you have spent some time with over the years?
Yeah, I can share about one of our wonderful community members, Joey Baresi. He moved up here after touring. He moved from the Virginia Beach area, and he'd been living just fine in Virginia Beach, but he heard about OSG, and so he and his dad came up. He really fell in love with the sense of community, some of the people that he met, the ability to come to OSG events on a regular basis. So he moved up and moved into Queens Court, which is in Roslyn, and he blossomed. One of the things that he was super, super proud of is that he became physically really fit. Like he dropped over 50 pounds because he was out taking walks. He was going to the Longbridge, it's called the Aquatic Center, to get, with his OSG peers. And so not only did he become physically strong, but he learned how to be a neighbor in the building. He went from just like learning how to be a community member to developing his communication skills so much that he went to the Arlington, what would you call it? It was a public hearing. And he was a self-advocate for affordable housing at a site that was being highly contested. There were a lot of folks in the neighborhood that didn't want it to happen. And so he was a part of that advocacy team that showed up multiple times to talk to Arlington County Council and answer questions about the importance of living at the center of community life as opposed to a segregated site that a lot of people with DD end up experiencing in a group home setting.
Wow, that's extraordinary, even to the point of advocacy. That's awesome. And so I'm thinking about the ways that your clients and people just living with developmental disabilities and living in a variety of different places up here in Northern Virginia, the thoughts about like programming and the things that they like to do, or how do they and you work together to create programming that they're excited about? And is that programming offered like on all the different campuses? Is it kind of centrally located? How do you get your clients and the communities in which they are integrated excited about some of the things that you're offering?
Yeah, just a couple of points, Paula. Again, feel free to jump in. The people that participate in our events aren't clients, so we call each other peers, and everything is free except for the times when we go out to dinner. We want to keep everything free because some of our participants are living on a couple $100s a month, and we really are very cautious around money. So in order to develop programming, we ask people what they want to do, and we try to keep that conversation going. Something that came up just recently is that some folks requested a creative writing event. And so we started that out at the Ovation, which is one of our sites, and it is right there in the community room at the apartment building. And once the word got out about how much people are really enjoying this new offering, now it's being offered at the Arden, which is down in Alexandria. And the way we regularly communicate is through WhatsApp channels. So we have, I don't know, a good 10, 15 WhatsApp channels, specific events or our sites, or, we have a social chat, we have friend groups, that kind of thing. But so it's regularly throughout the week, I see people send messages back and forth about, hey, here's what I just made at art, or I'm about to walk into the dinner club. Where do I need to sit? And people will say, oh my gosh, that looks like so much fun. Why don't we do it over here? So I would say we probably have, a list of about 10 to 15 favorite types of events: movie night, game night, trivia, the walks, the nature walks, getting together for dinners, things like that. And then that kind of is expanding and growing as more interests come up. Like recently we had a request for an anime group.
Very nice. And just as a follow-up question to that, if peers had friends, or if there are people who are listening that are not necessarily currently residing in any of your communities, are they able to participate and join in on some of these fun activities?
Yeah, so right now we have about 70 people that are housed at the 7 sites, and we have hundreds more that join us for weekly events. It is open to anyone, regardless of age, ability, background, and the more the merrier, the more inclusive. And so, yes, when people get interested in OSG, I always say, go to the events calendar, see what you are interested in, and just show up and see how you like it, because this is meant to be for everyone.
Excellent. Switching gears here slightly in terms of thinking about systems and policy and equity and all those other kinds of challenges that we all deal with, but uniquely to families and your peers. In 1999, the Olmstead decision affirmed the right to community living. Yet decades later, many are still waiting. What do you think is keeping policy from becoming a reality?
Well, I love the Olmstead. It shouldn't be called Olmstead. It should be called the Lois Curtis Act. But you see it as Olmsted versus LC. Lois was really the person who drove that historically. So I think right off the bat, it was wonderful. It took her 20 years to get out of the institution. After those 20 years, she lived 20 more years in the community. She had a rich life. The community, that's the key. Supported living. We'll talk about that in a second. But she went on to become an artist. She presented one of her paintings. She did a self-portrait. She never had any pictures of herself. She was institutionalized when she was 12 years old. And so, her story is our story. And so out of Olmsted comes this decision that people need to be given the choice to live in the community. It's a violation of their rights, the Americans with Disabilities Act, which comes before Olmsted. So, this is a long, brutal history. Ground zero for the disability movement begins at the Willowbrook State Institution in New York in 1972. So people who are listening can go and look that up. That's ground zero. It takes till 1999 to really begin to see the importance of giving people the right to move out of institutions, that it's a violation to house them. Because every time her legal aid lawyer came, she'd say, "What is it I can do for you?" And Lois would say, "Get me out of here." So what has happened is if after 1999, it's 2007, we get home and community-based services. And then it takes a long, long time. The time between 1999 and 2007, you have a lot of issues trying to implement these services by the Center for Medicaid Services. And then you have them come into play in 2007, but you still have, it takes till 2014, 7 more years before we have the settings rule, which begins to define the way these settings look like in the community to be considered an integrated setting, and how to get people out of nursing homes where they're residing, large group homes that are not considered integrated, because when you have group homes that are 12 to 16 people, it's like a small institution. So all of this movement begins to happen. And I'm going to say this, I think it's the most important thing. The billions of dollars that are spent trying to set these systems up, to monitor them, to regulate them, it is so costly, and I read this recently, of the $130 billion that are spent on home and community-based services, only 11% is on the waivers that support people to the community. Only 11% of that big piece of the pie. So imagine why we only have 10% receiving supports. Why we have 12,000 out with waivers and another 14,000 waiting. We have a system that is really difficult to navigate. It's almost like there's too much in the pot. Could we simplify it? Certainly in my lifetime, I'm not going to see it.
Yeah.
But it's so overburdened with bureaucracy. It can't get the money to the people.
Yeah. Well, just as a follow-up question, that then is like, what is, from your vantage point, a more just system look like? What could be changed to have your peers have an even better, more robust, supported system behind them?
Well, I think you got to start moving people, right? And there is a federal program called Money Follows the Person, and I'm pretty sure Virginia's a state, something we want to look into more at OSG. But if you have 820,000 people with disabilities in the United States living in nursing homes on wait lists to transition to the community, and that's costing $200,000 a person, then you could use these funds to try to begin to move people. But you need to set up things in place to do that. We've got 250 units in Virginia. I don't know, many of them are not utilized. I don't know what the number is, though. Margot can speak to that. But how do we encourage people? There's such a fear of letting people out of institutions and the types of supports they'll need. But it's cheaper. We know that. It still can be costly, but it's not $200,000 a year to do it.
Margaret, do you want to add to that?
These are the big structural problems that exist. And Virginia, we have to say, is like 47th in the nation for the kind of attention and funding that they've been giving people with developmental disabilities. I happen to serve on a commission that is connected to the governor called the Integrated Housing Advisory Committee. And I was just on that meeting earlier this week. People from the Department of Behavioral Health and Developmental Services, people from lots of different parts of the statewide structure. And we put a plan in place a couple years ago. The plan has kind of worked. And now the state wants to know, is the plan okay? And I'm like, no, it's not okay. It's not okay. We keep saying, like, we are looking backwards and saying, yeah, we kind of hit the benchmark that we set ourselves 5 years ago. Let's not look at that benchmark. Let's lead. Let's have Virginia actually lead instead of desperately trying to catch up. Like, enough is enough. And just very briefly, yes, in Northern Virginia, we have about 250 units that could be devoted to people with developmental disabilities. Right now, we're only using about half of them because we don't have the additional funding to go along with them. So every person that comes into one of those DD units has to come with funding to make it work. And right now, at the state level, and this is what we're advocating very strongly now at the General Assembly, is we need more state rental assistance. That's the lovely term. It's called the State Rental Assistance Program. How sexy is that? That's right. It just like trips off the tongue. We are desperate for, like truly this year, we're asking for $5 million. $5 million, that is nothing.
Yeah.
I mean, I know it is a lot to me. It's a lot to me. But when we see how much of a difference and what, 5 million as opposed to the huge $1 billion that the state is spending, I'm like, oh my gosh, we should be asking for so much more. We shouldn't be like satisfied with that little goal that we made a couple years ago. It's not enough. It just makes me angry. But we put our anger to good use.
Yeah. And 250, you're just talking about Northern Virginia. That doesn't even take in consideration across the state.
Yes.
Yeah. Wow.
Yeah. It's crazy. It's frustrating. And that's why we're here. And this is the niche that OSG is really good at filling. We get to be that extra voice. We go to the hearings, we show up with advocates and meet with, representatives. And more importantly, or not more importantly, but equally importantly, we help kids in the high school age group who are maybe in a transitions high school program, kids with developmental disabilities. We go and we talk to them too. We like, hey, housing can look like a lot of things when you graduate in a couple years. It's important for you and your families to hear this too, so that we can really shift what our culture thinks is possible.
Great.
And in spite of all the challenges and difficulties, I think it's important to say we have made strides. I feel the burden of so many people who are trapped in places that they can't get out of. And we should feel deeply for people that spent their lives and died sadly in institutions, abused or neglected. We should really all feel deeply about that. And so when I think about that and it starts to burden me, I think about recently I had a conversation. Margot has tasked me a little bit with getting a little bit more around the numbers and having an understanding. So I met with one of our partners, and I think something he said made a lot of sense. It's the piece of the pie. The piece of the pie 2 years ago was 2% in supported living, and now it's 4%. And even though that's small, that is because we are here.
So affirming what you do and the fact that you're here and the difference you're making on a local level, as well as a state level with your advocacy work. Let's assume that there's some people listening to the podcast that want to be involved. Is there ways for them to give towards your efforts in the forms of a donation? Is that monetary? Is there other physical things that you all need? In addition to that, if there are individuals that are listening and that are inspired by your work and want to be involved, do you have roles for volunteers as well? Like, how can people find their way to be supportive and interacting with you all at OSG Communities?
Yes. Well, like any good nonprofit, we have a donate page. We would love you to go there. Our money is all spent on programming primarily, right? So all of our events are staffed and people's donations go directly to our incredible staff. We, of course, have a small back of house, but since we are not bricks and mortar, really, so much of what people donate go directly to people's daily experience at OSG. So I highly encourage your support, your financial support. Also, people's time and talent is essential to us. OSG started as a purely volunteer organization. We didn't add staff until just a couple years ago. So people with expertise of any kind, please reach out, especially folks that have an interest in maybe supporting our events on the ground. Do you want to co-lead an artistic experience? Do you want to co-lead our monthly or our weekly urban excursion and go with Josue to the museum, go with Josue to the walk in Alexandria Old Town. But now we have also people who have maybe special legal expertise or a lot of good smarts around database management. We are like any other nonprofit or any other small business. It takes many brilliant minds to make the work go, and we would love your help.
Fantastic. Excellent. And then thinking about where OSG Communities is going next, like what does the future look like? I know you talked a little bit about your 5-year goal 5 years ago, and you hit that, and that was more of a broader agenda across the community. But now, specifically as an organization, where do you hope to be in another 5 years or 10 years, and what are some of the things that you might need to get there?
Yeah, we're talking a lot about how to increase our impact and become sustainable at the same time. So right now, I would say we're thinking about 4 or 5 different future scenarios. It could mean that we have more sites here in Northern Virginia. Certainly we will. We have a couple other housing partners that we are actively in conversation with in order to be on site with them and support the people with developmental disabilities in their buildings. We could expand across the state. We're definitely looking at how do we help other organizations, individuals, municipalities do what we do. Because in our search, and we're trying to really keep an open mind, we look for other organizations that are solving the problem like we are, and there aren't any. There aren't any organizations that do it quite like us in that we are partnering directly with affordable housing, right? And so how can we tell our story well and help other folks across the country and some international colleagues that have reached out? What of our approach is going to be helpful to them? And so this is essentially very informal technical support around what we do. And impact means more people living in inclusive settings at the center of community life and really having the life that they are most desiring. Paula, do you want to answer that a little bit more, though?
When I think about the future, if you asked me 7 years ago that we would have this, I mean, I'm so grateful that we've managed to do what we have done, which means that we probably are unstoppable at this point. We're unstoppable. And if you're unstoppable, then you will move that needle and that pie will get bigger and bigger. And people will begin to go around their neighborhoods and go, oh, that's Joey. That's Susan. I know her. And the understanding that we have for one another and our differences will get so much easier.
You're kind of leading us where I was hoping to end our conversation, and that was not only think about you all as an organization, but if you could think 5 to 10 years from now where you're trying to create that community, that ideal community for your peers, and you had the funding and the resources to back you up to make it to that place in 10 years, what would it look like? If you could kind of articulate that dream and that ideal community, what would it have, or what would it be like in that experience firsthand?
We certainly would have a community builder in every building, which is something that Margot's had to really work with her staff. They're taking 2 to 3 buildings. So we certainly would have one in every building. And they'd be working incredibly closely with the affordable housing resident services coordinators too. I imagine there's a TV screen, like when you walk up in those buildings, those boards, and it's OSG and Wesley, or OSG and True Ground, or OSG and whatever. And here's our events. And look what we're doing. And look at our spaces. And come to our picnics. And come help us clean up our neighborhoods. That's what it looks like.
Yeah. And as the person living in that building, because that's my future, I want to live at Gilliam Place or the Cadence. When I am on site leading events or having meetings and stuff, I'm just like, man, it just feels so good to be here.
Yeah.
And so the future is more people being able to walk into their building, regardless of who they are, whatever their, disability or not. It's like, I belong here. I know that person who I just saw go into the elevator. That deep sense of neighborhood, which sometimes I think about our buildings as they are both this beautiful island, right? Because it's like, oh, you walk in and you get the vibe and you're like, oh, I'm here. I love it here. And they are this beautiful, they are the center of a spider web, because if you walk 3 blocks that way, it's like, oh yeah, we went to that cafe together. Oh, that place is so cool. Oh yeah, there's Aziz's flower shop. They gave us this great workshop all about flower decorating. That was super fun. Or, oh, there's that park that we go to every Wednesday. right? So there's this beautiful island that is really a hub of neighborhood connectivity. And the neighbors outside the building are also like, oh man, I love going over to Killian Place. They're having this cool event. So there's less a sense of like that apartment building is kind of like it's all by itself. It's isolated and just much more sense of like these are permeable membranes. These are places where people come and go and really care about each other.
And it says it. This is an OSG community.
Yes.
They go, oh, that's great. I know OSG communities. And when you have our adults, and this is something I'd like to end on, when you're an adult with a disability, no one notices you except your family. Sadly, when we lose a member, which has happened in our organization, they mattered and people knew them.
Yeah.
They didn't go out unnoticed.
Yeah, it's almost the idea of seeing that OSG community sign and knowing that that's a great place to be a part of.
Yes.
And making it the destination for when people are trying to find where to live, or even if we have such transient community here in Northern Virginia, that name is known and said, wow, there's an OSG community here. I'm going to look there first before others.
Yes. I love that.
Yeah, that's awesome. Well, that's the dream that I've been inspired by from talking to the both of you. Is there anything we didn't talk about or anything else you wanted to add in this conversation?
Part of our work is to advocate. Like I said, we go to the state assembly, we go to, government meetings, all that kind of stuff. Knowing right now that we've got all the more reasons to go out to public events and protests and all the good stuff. If any of your listeners really love to make signs and go places and talk to political leaders, we are actively growing our advocacy team. So typically it takes a couple dozen people to really make that run, because some of these requests for testimony can come up very, very quickly. It's like, oh, I need you in tomorrow. So yeah, anybody who really just loves to be out in the public eye, talking to our representatives and our public leaders, that's a special request for me.
Excellent. Paul, anything else from you?
I'm just so happy that our adults are happy. And for my husband and I, yes, we can grow older, we can leave this world. And our son, he has friends, he has a community. Even at times when he's had to move back home because of different things over the past 7 years, roommates, which is something we hope to get in the future on our website, a kind of an iMatch system going, Mike. That's a real future tech dream for us. But even when he has to come back home, he's not unhappy anymore. I can't put a price tag on that.
Yeah. Well, thank you both again for sharing your valuable time with us today, and for the incredible work that you're doing, not only with the developmental disability community, but with our communities as a whole, that you're making a positive impact with. So thank you so very much.
Thank you for having us.